Yeah, it was like a wide receiver that drops the ball because they're already looking upfield. That was what Tony Corrente was doing. He was telegraphing the flag, but he wasn't telegraphing like, you've done stuff already. It's going to be in addition to this hip check, but I know I'm going to make contact, so I can't hide from everyone else what is obviously me rigging this. And he reaches for the flags after he hip checks Cassius Marsh. And now that's 3 things Marsh has under his belt. And it's a taunt.
Under his black belt.
Yeah. It's unfortunate the NFL decided to have all these partnerships with gambling entities, sportsbook entities, such as our good partners over at DraftKings. I think they have 5.
Our great partners over at DraftKings.
They're family. They're family. They're not partners. They're family. And they have this super arbitrary rule that is totally in the hands of these officials, and it makes games seem even more rigged by officials. It's odd timing. They need to clean that up. And Corrente, with that hip check, he needs to be suspended.
I would say that what you have in that league, no matter what your complaints are about the officiating, that league's blessing is also its curse, that these teams are so evenly matched and we have the ability with replay to just basically get these things a little bit too right with everything, that when there's a mistake by the officials, it ends up being too costly. That would have been a giant story last night if it hadn't impacted the result of the game. But when it impacts the result of the game, and then you get into the conversations of, wait a minute, is there a gambling link that I have to look at here? Because the part that you left out about the hip check and that Corrente had already decided that he was going to throw that flag no matter what, even if it meant he had to instigate contact. Like, that was an offensive foul on the referee. He initiated. He was James Harden. He initiated.
He drew a charge.
The NBA
well, Marsh was moving. Marsh was moving.
The NBA has outlawed what Tony Corrente tried to do, and I think you're being far too kind calling it a mistake. Tony Corrente meant to initiate contact with Cassius Marsh.
All referee mistakes. I mean, how they get hyperanalyzed because these teams are so evenly matched and because the games are close and because when you affect the stakes on something that has big stakes with one of these calls, it's going to get more noticed. But you didn't even mention the most James Harden part of what he did. When he threw the flag so high, he was incredibly pleased with himself. He was holding the motion like a Steph Curry 3, like holding his hand up like, I am at the center of the spectacle. The spectacle is mine. Look at me. And the grace with which on NFL films, when they slow that down, it's going to be amazing. When they do the artistic cinematography that has the flag float through the sky, he threw the hell out of that flag.
Yeah. It should be in slow motion at the hearing that Tony Corrente has at the NFL offices, because this isn't a mistake. This isn't a DPI. Browns have lost games against the Chargers with DPI. That shit happens. This was him going out of his way to initiate contact to further implicate a unsportsmanlike penalty on Cassius Marsh. It was bullshit what that guy did.
What was he actually penalized for? Was it the roundhouse kick? Was it shouting in the general, not seeming to shout?
It was touching the referee. That's what it was.
I think if he doesn't deliver that sweet-ass roundhouse kick,
right,
and he just merely does the slow trot kind of to midfield, saying something to the punter and going back,
he's good.
Nothing happens. It's the kick, and now they're on to you.
I enjoyed being introduced last night to Cassius Marsh when he took his helmet off, and you saw not just the mane of hair, but that he was also wearing something with an extraordinarily furry collar. He had the combination of hair and collar, looked a bit like a Viking. During the game, he spends a lot of time on his eye black. That is not something that is carefully administered, and it takes a lot of time. And it is exactly the guy, you knew him when you were 15 years old, the guy who was a little too into mixed martial arts and was doing roundhouse kicks around the neighborhood. He's been doing that since he was 15. I expect, I don't know about you, his mama calls him Cassius. I'm going to call him Cassius. I expected him to not be white. Just, you tell me.
Cassius Marsh?
Cassius, you just tell me Cassius Marsh, linebacker for the Bears.
Right. You just say Cassius, and there's hey, there's a guy named Cassius, right?
Yeah, but the surname kind of, I don't know.
Senior.
Do you know any Black Marshes?
Do you know any white Cassiuses?
That's a great question.
This is why I only know one Cassius, and I'm not even sure this is. I don't know what I'm doing with the ethnicity of the name. I just know only one Cassius.
He looked like Sabretooth in the post-game press conference. Tony Corrente said that, the contact had nothing to do with it. Tony Corrente is lying or displaying the behavior of a liar because he meant to do that. And regardless of anything that led up to that moment, you can't have a referee doing that.
Brad Marsh.
Bigger jerk last night, Jokic or Corrente?
Jokic resorted to thuggery. He resorted to the street stuff.
Now down low, it's going to be Al Horford. He drives. He goes up and gets knocked out hard. Oh, my goodness. The Heat have resorted to thuggery. And Al Horford slow to get up. Miami, they're down by 19, and they have to resort to the street stuff. That should be a flagrant foul. These Miami Heat players are street thugs.
That's courtesy of the Hawks Radio Network. Parakeet Cortez believes that Jokic should be thrown in jail for that. I want to, before we get to Jokic with Greg Cody, I do want to just go back one more second to get his thoughts on what happened last night with the Bears-Steelers game, because Tony Corrente is a great name for a villainous referee.
Yeah, for a crooked ref.
And I think I'm with Mike on this.
And a mob boss.
I think I'm with Mike on you need to suspend him. But would the league suspend him? Would the league actually do that, penalize him in a way that tells all referees, hey, you can't hip check the player to swing the game and then make the whole thing so look at me that you're standing in the middle of the chaos that you have wrought and you're holding up your hand as the flag cascades, floats down from the heavens with all of your ego and vanity soaked in it. Like
I love him holding the follow through. Sorry about my voice.
Jesus.
Yeah. I just need to get a sentence out, and then once I get a sentence out, and I just did, it's coming out right now. This is the sentence.
Free to do
once
that
I get it out, I'm good.
Feel free to do that before you get in here. You're professional.
I can't do that, Tim.
Yeah,
I can't. No,
yeah.
it's got to start here.
I love it when your voice goes bad. Because,
Thank you.
Because I do that occasionally.
Yep.
I have an issue with my voice, like just now. I thought it was great.
I mean, it's just great. They stumble in. They just stumble in.
I got my sentence out. I'm good. I'm fine.
I thought it was.
It's not getting better though.
3 sentences usually is.
It's just descent. It's a
4 sentences.
It's a descent into
5
hell.
sentences.
No, you need that. It's like your
have
vocal
to.
cords need
Yes.
it's calisthenics.
Warming up.
You got to warm up.
Stretch it out.
You have to stretch it out.
You
Right.
see, here we go.
I'm telling you, man. I'm simpatico.
Hey, isolate that. Here we go as we slide through the phlegm
there it is.
on the word go. It hasn't gotten.
You sound like Harvey Firestein.
Now I'm good.
And it's cold, too.
Not there yet. Not there.
In the cold,
Now.
you got to rev up the engine like
Hold
a
up.
car.
Yeah, hold up. Now.
There it is.
Now I am good.
There it is.
Yes.
What would be the equivalent of, like, what could LeBron James do to his body that would be the equivalent of what, like, Stugotz does to his voice?
In terms of not
Like,
taking
just, like,
care
not
of
taking
it?
care of it. Like, just, like, I guess if he ate McDonald's every day.
He could just risk paralysis with his every movement. Just so reckless with his entire life that he just doesn't value the only thing that he needs to value in order to continue making money.
Getting back to that ref for a minute, more important, getting back to me. I wanted to say, not only should he not be suspended, he should be given a raise, that guy. I loved it. It was performance art. I want more referees. I want more referees in my game. I want a guy like that. He's hip checking. He's throwing a beautiful flag. He's celebrating himself. I just thought it was glorious. It was great. And it was ultimately it was a good score. Final score was close, but I thought it was a pretty dull game.
Who's
That guy
being
spiced
safe
it up.
now? Huh, Dan? This is a bold,
This
polarizing take.
This is not an innocuous columnist, stung recently by his by the criticism that he's an innocuous columnist. He has just not only sided with the referee, not only refused to suspend him or punish him in any way, wants to reward him and wants a proliferation of Tony Corrente's prancing around throughout his sporting events, creating chaos and changing the results of the game. You can't. It's one thing to be a look-at-me referee. It's another thing to be the look-at-me referee who changes the results of the game with a move that was so villainous it should have been something Leslie Nielsen did in Naked Gun.
The guy got in the way of his hip.
So I thought with the league announcing gambling partnerships that things that you would have to scream into the alley, a shadowy alley, because you got totally boned by something, but you can't really go out and argue it because sports gambling was technically illegal. With the proliferation of sports gambling now and the league actually formalizing partnerships, I thought shit like this would be cleaned up. There has to be accountability, I think.
But in Greg's defense, is this not a correct application of their new point of emphasis? We have seen terrible taunting penalties throughout the league. This has been consistently administered. And I understand, Tony Corrente throws his backside out to make, contact with Cassius Marsh, but still, he's looking towards the sideline. We've seen these kinds of terrible taunting penalties get called all year.
We don't know that was intentional. What he did.
Wow.
What if he has a trick hip?
Oh,
Sometimes it just juts out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're not
Probably
taking
gather
into
the
account.
facts,
And that's his own personal health. We don't know what's going on there. Are you to tell us that he can't flex his hip from time to time?
I want to backtrack for a second because I did hear some announcers on Sunday really struggling, and one of them threw out Heine because people get scared in broadcasting around the backside. Now, you went in there with a lot of confidence, went right in there like a man who has in the past made whatever he's eliminated whatever trepidation he had around ass, Heine, took us, whatever it is that you wanted to say, whatever you have settled in on the confident backside is what you're going with that region, because I heard some announcers fighting over Heine, which I was not expecting this weekend.
Can't use Heine in 2021. No. We have to retire Heine, surely.
Unless you're talking about I almost said Redskins. About the Washington quarterback,
You
Taylor.
almost said
just-
it.
yeah,
Good,
you almost
good
said
thing
it.
you didn't say
To
it.
Billy's point,
And
though,
you said it.
do you guys ever have that hip issue where you your hip's a little locked and you got to open up that leg a little bit?
See?
It might have happened.
To Whitty's point,
They're ignoring us, Chris.
Tony Corrente was already, towing that company line. It's a point of emphasis. Sorry, mornings are rough for me.
Yeah,
little bit of
stretch it out,
Yeah.
Mike.
Calisthenics.
Calisthenics.
I had
Yeah.
to some
Here
tea.
we
Want some
go.
tea?
Here we
Uh,
go. Here we
yeah, I would
go.
love
Here
some
we
tea.
go. Here we
Okay.
go.
Do
Here we
something
go.
again.
Here we
Now,
go. Here we
now,
go.
now.
Yes, there you go.
Okay, so Tony Corrente
Boom.
was actually towing that company line. This is a point of emphasis. But if you've watched the NFL in recent weeks, they've been calling taunting a hell of a lot less than they were earlier on in the season because it went over like a lead balloon. You can't have a point of emphasis. It's entirely subjective and put even more power into the ref's hands, especially when we're watching at home and we don't know what's going on. If someone's lining up in the neutral zone, and if it's Robert Quinn doing it twice, I can see that. That can be a point of emphasis. You can't make a point of emphasis something that's entirely subjective when you've announced 5 gambling partnerships.
They can, because they have. It is important to them, to the Wellington Maras of the world, to...
You keep blaming Wellington
It
Mara.
is his fault. That's his son. That's his son out
He's the
there.
only one bothered by it.
Wellington Mara, just for the record, is no
Nepotism.
longer with us.
Wellington Mara. This is his spirit haunting us from the beyond
Like
through
father,
his
like
son.
son. Yep.
And you've got to grant me that in giving it to Wellington Mara, it is the perfect comedic name to assign the No Fun League, because the two things that I saw brought up again and again, the two things when you see the outlandish moment of a referee appearing, whether he's got a trick hip or not, to instigate contact so he can throw a flag high in the air and hold his form on the follow through and decide that game. The two things that I heard more than any other were the complaint of You have to be kidding me. Deciding a game with no fun league taunt as the call, combined with the gambling element. Those are the two things that people were immediately going to. And one of them you really don't want around football. This is why Goodell was a follower, not a leader on gambling. He waited for all the other leagues to be aggressive with this, and they like money in football. And he's like, no, we'll sit out that oil well, largely sit it out until we get permission from everybody else because we're the most conservative league, and our fans might want to moralize around the sport. That he doesn't want. But they very much do want the idea that they've stopped these athletes from emoting so much that it's unsportsmanlike. That is league-wide edict. That is owners trying to exert their power. And you say taunting calls are down. I trust you, but I haven't seen numbers on that. I feel like there are complaints about this every week. There's some stupid taunting call in a game.
There are, but I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure the sheer volume of calls on this entirely subjective rule have gone down because it hasn't been popular. For people watching at home, it's been hard to follow. And I hate to be like the gambling guy on it, but I was resigned to the fact that this shit happens and it's a bad beat. But it's a dawn of a new day. It's legal now. We can talk about it. You're advertising with it. You want people to go to DraftKings. You've signed billion-dollar deals. So this is the penalty for all of that, is accountability. You can't have a referee doing that. Even if gambling isn't there, you cannot have a referee initiating contact. And I'm not even talking about the bullshit that led up to that. What Tony Corrente did by putting that cherry on top, by showing you the manifestation of his intention there, by showing you how flawed he was as a human being, that's wrong. It's wrong.
Chris Cody making a face.
Are you going after his character now?
Yeah,
I'm just as a human being.
I am going after his character.
I honestly hot today.
No, he had a vendetta.
I honestly think what happened to Corrente is what happened to Jokic. He was angry and he saw red for a split second and he did something he shouldn't have done. I don't think this is
but he's a ref.
No, I'm with you. It's unacceptable. He should be punished. But I don't think this is like some deep he's hated this guy for years and it's like I'm gonna get him.
He had a vendetta in that moment.
Right.
He flashed.
Right.
The problem is Jokic can't call a 15-yard penalty deciding the game.
No, that's true. He should be punished.
This is a Von Damme.
He should be executed.
This is a Von Damme movie. Tony Corrente had a vendetta is on the poster, and Cassius Marsh is doing the roundhouse kick. I can't believe the number of people in America talking about Tony Corrente today. And I want to ask the group the question of, is this one of those circumstances for no matter how much we gnash and wail, is this a Chris Cody circumstance of any publicity is good publicity? Because the real harm, no matter how much people are complaining about your league, the real harm in the short term is nothing. It's just people talking about a game they otherwise wouldn't be talking about because Bears, Steelers, isn't that interesting. And so now you have the soap opera elements. You have it's the night. Mike Tomlin got his 150th win last night. He's one of only 20 coaches to do that. The Steelers have a great streak, 19 straight Monday night wins. What a great feeling for a fan base to keep tuning in on Monday night and your team always wins. But those are two teams that are not going to win the Super Bowl. We don't know much about football. We know those two teams are not going to win the Super Bowl. They played a game, the only game of the night. It had stakes, and in the middle of it, you had something that has us clucking like crazy and will fill the cycle today. No baseball. You will not see on television anything about baseball, basketball, and the Lakers and Carmelo. Everything will go off and recede into the distance. Everything on television will be talking about that game last night. Is the controversy actually that bad until you get to the point that the integrity of the results are in question because you have so many gambling-related questions or gambling-adjacent suspicions that it becomes corrosive, which is the reason it's the danger of getting involved with gambling to begin with. It's what they've always feared reputationally.
And it's not just the gambling aspect. The Chicago Bears season, and I know a lot of things in that game developed after that play. Chicago still had an opportunity to win that regardless of that, but it played into the result. And forget the gambling. You just had a 53-man roster break their bodies on a Monday night, have a short week turnaround, laid it all out there, and could have potentially had a win at Pittsburgh, at Heinz Field, which would have been massive for their season in a hotly contested NFC playoff chase. And it was just ruined basically by a vendetta. We have the video. It's irrefutable.
And also to the point that Mike brought up earlier about the taunting penalties being down, there were 11 in the first 2 weeks of the season, and in an AP story in October, they referenced there were only 3 in weeks 3 through 5 of the season. So they are down. Troy Vincent gave a quote to the story saying, coaches are liking where this is trending. The players aren't doing this anymore. They're keeping it in mind. So it's a point of emphasis early, as they often are, but it has decreased since.
I think Mike and I define vendetta differently.
Yeah, and me.
When he says basically a vendetta, that's a lesser Von Damme
You
movie.
think a vendetta is like a more long-term... Yes. Yeah.
He got emotional. He got emotional in that moment, and he let his emotions get him, and he did something he shouldn't have done. Like, I think that's indisputable.
It's ridiculous.
I think it's from the evidence that we've seen, it's totally plausible that they saw this roundhouse kick and been like, well, is that taunting? Because we've never seen that
It's
before.
obviously taunting.
But we didn't pull the flag there. So now let's just lock in on him. He chattered some, but is that enough? Nah, let's have him bump into me, but I'll initiate contact. Boom, dead to rights.
The 2 definitions for vendetta, the first one is a blood feud. The second one is a prolonged bitter quarrel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Long-term, man.
it's a bit longer term than the 20 seconds that it takes for a football play to develop.
my
But he's
sword
right.
down.
No, but he's right in this. He's right in this. It is longer term in that he was holding on to it since the roundhouse kick. So it was longer term. Like, he should have just thrown the flag. I don't think anybody would have said, if a guy does a roundhouse kick and they throw a flag, I think a lot of people would have said, that's wrong. You shouldn't have probably flagged that, but I understand. It's way too showy given where it is that your league is on this stuff, but he needed something that was more unimpeachable, and so he threw his hip in there.
Right.
And you don't believe, when you said, you didn't finish your thought, you said, what's ridiculous?
Well, the idea of saying there's a vendetta. If there's a vendetta there, it's a little micro mini vendetta that fostered over the previous 30 seconds or whatever. I just think that there's more. Flags are an issue. Whitty, I'd be interested to find out if flags in general are up in the NFL, let alone taunting, because
Not
it
so
seems like they are.
Not so interested that you would ever look it up yourself, right?
Right,
Yeah, well,
exactly.
we trust Whitty.
But it seems like they are, and I find the NFL increasingly unwatchable. And here's why.
What?
Wow, all the primetime games have delivered.
I know.
What?
Listen, here's why.
Innocuous this.
When your team
Innocuous this.
makes a big play, when your team completes a 49-yard pass, you hold your breath before you cheer because you're waiting for that flag. Flags have stultified the NFL. I think it's ridiculous. Big plays are called back by motion penalties, and a guy jumped by an inch. It's something's wrong with football.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it's
I wasn't
more than a hip
expecting
check,
you
fellas.
to stick the landing, but I understand.
Wait a minute. What do you mean something's wrong with football?
Because they rob the emotion
But
away from
you're
you.
There's
saying
no
it's-
flow to the game. There's too many flags. That's what I mean.
Guillermo, put it on the poll. Have you ever used the word stultified? Guillermo, so you called for his execution because you.
Well,
you,
we're all saying things today. I figured let's just get
no
there
one
already,
more,
you know?
No one more than Cody, though, until you did one up him while suggesting that we should execute Tony Corrente.
Yeah.
I did think that.
I won't go that far. I might go life in prison. Definitely not execution.
It's early still. We can get you there.
Thank you.
He's made football unwatchable. He essentially killed a sport for you.
Greg, unwatchable? Like, I understand complaining about the flags. You're making a good point. I believe a lot of people are bothered by you're always waiting. Is that little yellow thing going to show up in the corner of my screen? It's not
Right.
even the flag. It's just the graphic.
Yes.
Is the television graphic going to put a yellow flag?
Maybe they should just get rid of the graphic.
You're just not soccer guys. Because soccer, I can't celebrate anything in soccer anymore because of VAR. It was bad enough with the offside flag. I have never celebrated a goal more than when Chelsea equalized in the FA Cup. And like 2 minutes later, there was an offside flag and the goal was taken away. That's hard. The flag, we're predisposed in the NFL to always look at the bottom, that bottom liner to see if the flag graphic's going to come up.
Exactly.
What are the stops on this, though? Because we've talked before, and I've told you guys before, that going back to when this rule change started, I believe, Greg Cody, it had to do with a Vinny Testaverde play that Vinny Testaverde at quarterback, it was a goal line play, and clearly at the end of that game, the wrong team had won because the referees had gotten it wrong on the field. And the advancements that came after that were so far-reaching that we now are microscopically officiating these games from every single angle while, and this part's always interesting, you've got, technically, you're getting it so very right here, but Mike, all over the field, you have subjectivity. So you're saying you can't make one rule subjective, but every play, there's somebody holding somebody else, and all of it subjective. So you have what I'm saying on these isolated instances of getting it more accurate. I've been complaining about this is too much. This is too much. When you have, you're trying to get it more and more accurate, but you have subjective all over the field, pass interference, everywhere else you've got subjective. And here you're trying to get it too specific. But I don't go all the way, Greg, to unwatchable or ruining my viewing experience. You're still watching all of this. You're bothered by it, but nobody's doing unwatchable on this. Nobody's doing unwatchable on, even if I tell you today that there are gambling suspicions all around what Tony Corrente did.
Right. Unwatchable is hyperbole for dramatic effect. I give you that. But the thing about officiating is, did the flag directly affect the play? My complaint is that don't call what may or may not be a holding penalty unless it prevented a sack, unless it opened up a hole for that running back. If it was peripheral to the result of the play, why are you calling it? If there's a completion downfield and it's negated because an offensive lineman was 5.5 yards downfield instead of the limit of 5, why are you calling that? It did not affect the play in any way whatsoever. I just think there are too many superfluous penalties that need not be called.
An overwhelming part of our audience does not wager on these games. So we're harping on one little isolated part, not little, but an isolated part of a game that was actually terrific. Justin Fields had moments. It's just unfortunate that we're talking about this. And while I agree with you, a lot on that field is subjective. Taunting specifically appears to be the most subjective. And also, as a viewer at home, the hardest for me to decipher whether an illegality has happened.
It is one of the places, and you've heard me complain about this with dress codes in the NBA or in the NFL with do-rags, where the rules are meant to be for everybody, but you know that they're fining Quentin Richardson when he's wearing a collarless shirt, and they're not even noticing the games that go by that Stan Van Gundy is wearing a collarless shirt. This is a very subtle place where the power, which is almost exclusively white, and the arm of enforcement of referees that is meant to be doing the work of the white owners, they are eradicating from the game something that largely the white customer and consumer is the one moralizing about, because this is what's happening here in trying to get rid of the taunting and having an idea of sportsmanship that might not be everybody's idea of sportsmanship.
Just want to be clear. Cassius Marsh is white.
Helpful, like you were going down a path, and
I was still doing that. I thought he was black.
yeah, because Cassius.
He's not.
Cassius, yeah,
He's not.
yeah.
He's white.
What I'm saying is the rule overseeing everything. I'm not saying that this is being done to Cassius Marsh because he's black or white. I'm saying the people making the rules are the brethren of Wellington Mara, who isolated and identified a problem that wasn't actually there. Nobody was complaining about that except the people in the room making that rule. Who was complaining about the taunting in the NFL? Did you know that taunting was a problem in the NFL?
I knew taunting was a problem in the NFL.
Oh, come on,
yes.
Stugotz.
No,
I mean, come on. We didn't know taunting was a problem in the NFL amongst the older owners. Get out of here.
No, that's not what I'm saying. The taunting
to you. Were you ever like appalled?
I mean, I guess not. To me, no.
People tend to point to the Super Bowl. People tend to point to the Super Bowl with Antoine Winfield holding up the peace sign to Tyreek Hill after the interception as like that is a really bad look. That is poor sportsmanship, and that was used as the gambit for these conversations, according to certain reports.
Cassius's middle name is Lee.
Cassius Lee, I like it. Taunting has to be very extreme to be called, in my opinion. If it's obvious, if it's totally offensive, you call it. If it's borderline, it's not taunting, it's showmanship. That's what's trying to save baseball is showmanship. The idea that guys are doing a slow home run trot and pointing at the pitcher, that's great for baseball. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Look at Greg Cody.
Wow.
Yeah.
It engages younger people.
Jury duty changed you.
Who is this person?
I love jury duty, by the way, but that's a whole different story.
No one loves jury
Oh,
duty.
Love
I
jury
adored
duty?
it. Yeah, it was great. It was fantastic.
Really?
It's such a great experience.